The story I'm about to share with you is by far one of the most insane, most ridiculous political/economic stories you're ever going to hear, and it goes a little something like this. Bill Pulte, the US Director of Federal Housing, was just proven to be the biggest of the entire administration, and guess what? Guess who's his daddy? The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Now first, to truly appreciate how ludicrous this entire story is, let me lay a little bit of groundwork. First off, there's really nothing going on in the world of the stock market today. Things are a little bit slow. I guess everyone has a case of the Mondays, so I'm very happy that this story dropped. Nasdaq hits a new record, but S&P 500 is little change ahead of inflation data this week. If you look at the daily chart of the S&P 500 inside day, it's slightly green at the point that I'm filming this. Really nothing's going on, and as that article alluded to, we're all waiting for the inflation report to drop this Wednesday and Thursday. We get PPI followed by CPI. So basically, here I was sitting around basically watching paint dry, and I found one of the craziest stories, and trust me, this will not disappoint. There's two main characters you need to know. Number one is Bill Pulte. He is the US Director of Federal Housing, and he's the guy right now that's pushing the whole story with Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, with the alleged mortgage fraud, and if it is, should she even be a Fed governor? Basically, he is a hardcore Trumper, like through and through. The other person in this story, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This is a well-respected person on Wall Street within the administration. You could argue that he's the architect of everything going on with trade and the trade negotiations. He's commonly thought to be the adult in the room. If you look at his history on Wall Street, he is lauded by many. He's an expert in the world of currencies and interest rates. So two very different calibers of person. On one hand, you have a guy that has a very impressive resume on Wall Street, and right now in the administration is making serious changes and efforts, while on the other hand, you have Pulte here, who is literally nothing than a trust fund baby. His grandfather grew a company, he managed to not be able to grow it at all, and basically he took the money that he inherited and he just attaches himself to big digital communities, like when AMC and GME and BBBY were all going crazy, he would just talk with them all the time, like, retweet, do these giveaways, but two very different people. So with that context in mind, you have one guy who's a hyper successful rainmaker, and then you have another guy who is basically just where he is because of his daddy's money. It makes this entire story that much more crazy. I'm gonna punch you in your face. Scott Bessent threatened an administration rival. With a headline like that, how can you not dive in? A private dinner attended by dozens of administration officials and close advisors to President Donald Trump was temporarily marred by a dramatic clash between two of Trump's top economic officials, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at one point threatening to punch top housing finance official Bill Pulte in the face. Before we really get into the nitty-gritty details, I cannot explain how much money I would pay to have witnessed this firsthand. Sounds like an amazing form of entertainment. Amid the cocktail hour din, Bessent lashed out at Pulte in an expletive-laden diatribe. The Treasury Secretary had heard from several people that the Federal Housing Finance Agency director had been bad-mouthing him to Trump. He wasn't about to engage in chit-chat as if nothing was amiss. Why the are you talking to the president about me? I'm gonna punch you in your face. You know, I always heard it, but now I really believe it. French is an absolutely beautiful language. At this point in the story, everyone started paying attention to what in the world was going on, and of course, when you have a room full of adults, they try to separate the two, and it's at this point that the Treasury Secretary said, it's either me or him, you tell me who's getting the out of here, or we could go outside. And then this is when Pulte responded, to do what? To talk? And then this is really when the Treasury Secretary kind of showed who he is. No, I'm going to beat your ass. And it was at that point that Pulte realized his granddaddy's money couldn't save him from an ass beating. Now, obviously, it didn't actually get into a physical altercation. They basically just separated the two guys and things calmed down. But what a crazy story. Going into this, and I'll be honest, I already had a very low opinion of Pulte. I just thought he was the human form of a leech. But after going through the story and reading it multiple times, the fact that he's also a top tier on top of it, it makes the whole thing that much more comedic. Which leads me to my final point. Well, really, it's my final question of the video, and I would love to hear from you in a comment below. If you had to bet on one gentleman in a 1v1 winner-takes-all boxing match, Who are you going with? Are you going with the Treasury Secretary, or are you going with the guy that's really done nothing in his life? Let me know in a comment below. That's what I have for you today. I appreciate the good vibes. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.